workshop. By the end of this session, this is what we want you to be able to do: to facilitate active learning with Zoom breakout rooms, to use Zoom polls to engage students, to manage a live Zoom breakout room in your TA role, and we'll extend that, as I mentioned before, more broadly to instructional role. You'll be able to practice using breakout rooms, and you'll engage with a growing online TA community and have a chance to talk with each other about your experiences with Zoom so far.
So just more broadly, thinking about your role as an online TA, and we do have a lot of faculty with us today who no doubt are also overseeing groups of TAs. The information we're going to cover today is going to help an online TA in their role of communicating and supporting students, providing that inclusive climate in Zoom, holding virtual office hours in Zoom and working with students in Zoom breakout rooms. Moderating chat and group work in Zoom. So the TA will often meet with students and teams in breakout rooms to help facilitate their work. And then as they're helping with lectures, they're going to moderate chat. And this is especially important when you've got large lecture classes online as well. Managing a Zoom virtual class, that includes looking at a lot of the nonverbal and verbal feedback, running polls to engage students, and again, using those breakout rooms to engage the students throughout the session. And then also providing instruction and sharing those examples, whether using the screen share feature in Zoom, the whiteboard, annotating, and recording video. So we'll touch on a host of these applications today.
And I will walk you through Sakai and Zoom and how to use the two together. So we'll talk about how to turn on the tool in your Sakai site, how to schedule meetings in there, and then also how to record in the cloud and then retrieve those recordings. So you have two ways to access Zoom, and this could be a potential point of confusion, so we're addressing it now. If you look on the right side of the screen, where there's the arrow and it says this is what you see to authenticate on a computer, that is from the duke.zoom.us website. And you log into there, and because Duke has paid Zoom for a subscription, there are several additional options that you can activate to use in your Zoom lessons. And this is different than if you were to use Zoom in your personal account. So you need to use your Duke NetID and password to log in, and then you have access to the enhanced features that Duke has paid Zoom. So if you wanted to enable polling, for example, which we will come to later in this presentation, you would need to activate it here at the duke.zoom.us. Now that's important because if you're going to integrate it to your Sakai site, you'll want to be able to use that feature. But if you don't have it enabled on the duke.zoom.us, it won't cross over to the Sakai site. So keep that in mind and just take some time and have a look at all the settings because they are really lengthy. Again, that's the benefit of Duke paying the enhanced subscription, but it does take some time to go through. And we can't go through all of them here because there are just so many. So have a look at that. Once you've enabled it, then we're transitioning to the Sakai site, which is on the left side of the screen. That is, you can access by that Zoom Meetings button. And we're going to discuss that now. So first you have to enable that tool on your Sakai site. So how would you do that? So if you see on the left, there's a highlighted in blue, this little gear that says site info. This is once you're on your Sakai site, you would press that button and then that screen pops up that you see in the center there. You would press the button Manage Tools, and that's what you see before you. And you scroll down, all the way down, and then you see Zoom Meetings. Now you would hit the check mark, make sure the box is checked, hit continue, hit save, and then it will be enabled. And then you will see something like on the screen, if you look to the left side, highlighted in blue, where it says Zoom meetings. That's what it'll look like once the tool is enabled and turned on. So then the next thing is then to schedule a meeting. Once you have enabled the tool and then click on it, you will see a similar menu to the one that's shown before you. And you will hit on the button that is in blue on the right side of the screen. It says schedule a new meeting. Okay, now let's say you scheduled the meeting, you've recorded it like we're recording now, and then the student emails you, says he or she was absent and they would like to retrieve the recording. How do you do that? Well, when you're in your Sakai site, have the student click on the Zoom meetings button. And then when that person is there, you can see where the red arrow is indicating it's already there for you, a cloud recording. And this cloud recording comes in multiple files. There's a video file, there's an audio file, and then there's a separate file for all the chat that goes on in the main room. But bear in mind, this does not cover anything in the breakout rooms. This is just the recordings and the chat that goes on in the main session, like the one we're in now. Okay, this is then showing you the alternative view from duke.zoom.us. So this is not Sakai. You can also schedule meetings here. But if you schedule a meeting here, keep in mind your students are not going to see this in Sakai, right? That's a separate issue. So this is why we recommend to schedule the meetings by enabling the Zoom tool in Sakai, and then that way the students can see all the meetings there. I've made the mistake myself of creating a meeting here and thinking people could see it, and they in fact could not. Okay, when you're at your duke.zoom.us account, this is how you would retrieve the recordings yourself. So you see it's slightly different to the screenshots we were showing you earlier of Sakai. You would actually hit the button recordings, and then you can see I have this Fulbright talk and there's multiple files broken down. And again, the reason why there's 5 files or more than one is because they break it into several sections and separating them accordingly with a video, audio, chat. If you press stop, like if we were to stop the recording right now, that would create a smaller chunk, and then you would press record again, and then that would create yet another chunk of recordings. And you may wish to do that for your students if they don't have access to a lot of memory on their laptop. It may be easier for them to download smaller chunks at a time.
I'd like to take a minute to talk about a tool that you may not have used in your Zoom interactions, and it's called the polling tool. And this is a nice way to engage your students, even if you can't think of an obvious way that polling fits into your course content. So I've added some bullet points here for some ways that you can incorporate polling into your Zoom. The first one is a check for understanding. And that's sort of your classic way to take the pulse, so to speak. If your students, if you are explaining a concept, you can use a poll to assess the student's understanding of that concept. You can also use a Zoom poll to motivate discussion. So for example, you could post at the very beginning of the class a question like, do you think that Duke should have gone totally remote for the semester? And then maybe you and your students will have a discussion for 10 or 15 minutes, and then maybe you'll post the same question again, and you can see how the agreement or disagreement with your prompt has changed. And finally, you can use it as a way to collect student input. For example, if you want to ask your students how prepared they feel for an exam or an assignment. I have an example down here at the bottom. It says exactly that. How well do you understand the assignment? And this is just a way for you to use polling that doesn't really have to do with the content of your class, But the idea here is just to have some sort of interactive experience with your students during a Zoom call. Your students are going to have Zoom fatigue, we all do, and Zoom polling is just a really nice way to spice things up and to easily add some variety to your class. Next slide, please. So I'm going to reiterate what Anderson just went over. There are two different Zooms, or there are two different places for you to interact with Zoom. On the left, it's Sakai, and then on the right, it's duke.zoom.us. And Zoom polling is one of the settings that Anderson mentioned. And so by default, Zoom polling is not enabled. So the first thing you have to do is go to duke.zoom.us into your settings and enable polling. And you can see that box there at the top. Once you've checked it off, then it becomes blue. So once you've enabled polling, then you can use polls for your Zoom meetings, regardless of whether they're launched in Sakai or whether they're launched from duke.zoom.us. And in fact, there are two different ways to set up a poll depending on whether you're living in the Sakai environment or the duke.zoom.us environment. If you are on duke.zoom.us, there is a graphical user interface to create a poll, which means that you click create poll, and then you click add new question, and then you type your question, and you click add new question. So it takes a lot of different clicks to manually create your poll. So that's one way to do it. And then finally at the bottom, if you are using Sakai, if you're using Zoom inside of Sakai to create your poll, you go to your Sakai site, you make your Zoom meeting exactly how Anderson described, and then at the bottom, there is a little section where you can create your poll. And the way that you do that is you download the CSV template, and then you open it up in something like Excel, and it's basically a skeleton of a poll. There's a place for you to write your question, there's a place for you to write the possible answers, and you fill out that little CSV, and then you click a button that says upload back to Sakai, and then your poll is created. So before this meeting, we've actually done that. I used that download CSV option, and I typed up a question, and then I uploaded it into this Zoom meeting before it began. And so because I've created a poll and because I've enabled a poll, that means that I can launch it now. So for me, because I'm a host, and because I've enabled polling, and because I've created a poll, there's a little button next to my green share screen that says polling. And if I click on that button, I can click another button that says launch. And now hopefully you all, as my students, should see a poll pop up on the screen. And the question is, how comfortable do you feel facilitating Zoom breakout rooms? And because I'm the instructor, I can watch the responses come in. So I know that 7 of you have voted. I know that it's been 23 seconds since the poll started, and I can see the distribution of the responses come in live. So now I can see that 80% of my students have responded to my poll. That's pretty good. So I'm going to click end poll. And then there's a button that says share results. So I can click that button. And now I can show the class how we all responded to the poll. So it looks like a few more of you are comfortable than uncomfortable. That's great. A lot of you feel neutral about facilitating breakout rooms. And hopefully by the end of this workshop, you will all feel super comfortable facilitating Zoom breakout rooms. There's a question about the availability of polling to the host. And I am actually not the host, I am a co-host. And so as the co-host, I do have polling privileges. The results of the polling, that's actually a good question. I'm not sure if they are saved in a tabular format, something like a CSV. There's certainly, you can rewatch the video and you would see what you're seeing now, but I do not know if you can download the results as far as the data itself. That's a good question.
I have been told that you can access them similarly to like the cloud recordings and where the recordings that I showed you earlier, that you can access that data there, but I have not done it myself.
It's possible exactly as Anderson described.
Great. There's another question about Poll Everywhere. And I do not have experience with Poll Everywhere. I have used Google polling instead of Zoom polling. And the nice thing about Google, of course, is that it's all shared in your drive, so it's easier to sort of reuse and recycle. There's a little more nuance to recycling polls in the Zoom format, but I'll ask if any of my colleagues have used Poll Everywhere.
I've used Poll Everywhere. I haven't used it with Zoom, but it's an entirely web-based platform for polling. It's a lot more flexible and interesting and engaging, honestly, than Zoom polls are. Zoom polls are, to be honest, they're kind of one-dimensional. We uploaded a CSV file. It's great for asking a simple question. Poll Everywhere is much more interactive, but with that additional interactivity, if you're using Zoom, you're going to be navigating two technological systems that weren't necessarily made to work together. I think it would work, but it would definitely call for some experimenting before rolling it out in class. Unless you want to roll it out in class and let your students do the experimenting, which would be a nice way because you get them to kick the tires. And if it doesn't work out too well, that's fine. You can experience that together and figure it out together.
Right, and I think Hugh too, I've spoken with some faculty who want to go a bit further than what the polling features available in Zoom, and so they've used Qualtrics, you know, going beyond using it as a survey tool. I think there are some polling type features available in Qualtrics too.
So we're going to begin the conversation now with Zoom breakout rooms. And Zoom breakout rooms are a great feature within Zoom that allow us to have some flexibility with our teaching, especially when we're in hybrid modes or virtual modes for our classrooms. Because when we're in person in our classrooms, we all have had experience in teaching teaching classes with presentations, group projects, activities, problem sets, and open class discussions. And by using Zoom breakout rooms, we can get pretty close to using those same pedagogical tools that we have always used. And it's just the difference is now that you are creating these virtual rooms to facilitate the same activities that are actively engaging our students. So let's focus next on launching a Zoom breakout room. Remember, for launching a breakout room session is that only the host can create and assign breakout rooms. Co-hosts do not have this ability. And when you decide to launch a breakout room as a host, you have the option in your view, right there in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, we have highlighted in the green box, breakout rooms. They're 4 little squares. And when you see this option, all you have to do is click on it, and it allows you to create these breakout rooms. But again, for one last iteration before we move on to the next slide, only the host can create these breakout rooms, not the co-host. So any of you faculty members who are hoping to have your TAs run this, you should consider having your TA or one of your TAs to be the main host, and you in fact be the co-host so that you have the ability to do lecturing while a breakout room can be created in the background by one of your TAs. Next slide. So with Zoom breakout rooms, once you've clicked that little 4 square icon, you now have the option of creating multiple breakout rooms and assigning a certain number of participants per room, either manually or automatically. Automatically is the most simple way of assigning rooms. So here you have this little lovely screenshot where in the left window, you have the ability to assign the number of participants to the number of rooms. And you have the ability to create up to 50 breakout rooms. If this is your first time creating the rooms, please press the blue button that says Create Breakout Rooms. These rooms and participant designation will be randomly assigned to the length of the Zoom session that you have chosen, and it'll be randomized automatically based on the number of participants per room that you've designated. If you are launching a breakout room for the second time within the same session, this is very important, so please listen in. If you want to have an additional randomization of rooms and mix these conversations up with students pairing with different people within the same session, you must press the recreate button, which is that window below in the options section. If you can locate that. In the bottom box, bottom narrow box right there, recreate. It seems a little counterintuitive at first, but recreate means recreating the randomization. It does not mean recreating the same breakout rooms as before. If you choose to have your students working in the same groups throughout the whole session, please stick to pressing the Create Breakout Rooms button in blue. And that will allow you to have the same group of people for the length of your Zoom session, but they will not be saved from session to session. So to the right, you have another option. And this option, you are able to assign individual participants to specific rooms. However, it can be quite laborious, and it's not something that the lecturer can do within the time frame of their assigned synchronous time easily. Either you have a TA do this on the back end with a host privilege, or we would recommend, especially with those of you who have classes of larger than 20, to stick to randomized breakout rooms. However, if you have a smaller class of maybe 6 to 12, it is definitely feasible. Next slide. So with breakout rooms, as I said, you have options. Under those options where you have the recreate button, if you look to the right, is add a room and open all rooms. You also have the addition to customize the experience a bit more, including moving all participants into breakout rooms automatically, allowing participants to return the main session at any time, and not to worry if you have a participant who's coming to the main session where you, the host, the teacher, might be grading the back, but they want some additional help. You, as the host, can also send them back into the breakout room with that option. You also are able to set a time limit for all breakout rooms to close, and also notifying you as the host when time is up, and providing a countdown timer for students to wrap up. This is really great in making sure that discussions don't go past the allotted time of your class or of your own individual schedule for that particular lesson day. Next slide. So I have some advice that for before, during, and after all breakout rooms. And the first is to make sure co-hosts and hosts know which rooms to visit. It's good to have a clear idea on what rooms to visit. And for those of you who haven't had this experience yet, even though host, it can only be the one to assign for who is in what room to start off with. Anyone designated as co-host has the ability to freely move between all the breakout room sessions. This is great for TAs and the professor to check in on students who might have some questions that pop up in the smaller group settings, especially if you're having them work on a specific assignment. Before you do that, please make sure you communicate with faculty and the TAs on who is to go to what room. Make sure everyone gets individual attention. Also, it's important to designate a return time and a specific task. This task and return time will allow you to have it clearly communicate the expectations from all the students. And please post the task in the chat section during the main session before launching, because once you launch, students lose access to any shared screen in the main session. And in the chat section from the host, you're able to leave it there and the chat session does not disappear. And also pause the record button, as Zoom breakout sessions will not be recorded anyway, and it'll help with preventing dead air. During the time, please visit rooms as co-host and host, and able to give individual attention like you would in person. And broadcast message option is great if you have anything that you want to share amongst all the groups together as host. That is an option as host to share that information. And then finally, afterwards of your Zoom breakout session, always remember to unpause recording so that you can continue recording the main session for any students who weren't able to attend and can participate asynchronously and not miss out. And also, it's great to, what we have done ourselves in all of our TA workshops and Doc Academy is to have a whole group report out and discussion session so that all of our students can benefit from the different ideas and information and processes that the students themselves have experienced in the session. If it's a problem set, having everyone show how they would solve the equation. If it's an open discussion on a historical policy, it's great to hear the different pros and cons of each. And it's a way for this class to communicate and connect with one another in the main session.